pretty diverse group of people to have this conversation, both from the MSP side, the vendor side, and the cool thing about this, even if you're not somebody in the channel or MSP side of things, events are applicable across all industries. It kind of doesn't matter. Jim, you're in this whole conversation got started. You kind of posed a question on LinkedIn, which was, what is the best way to drive engagement between conference attendees and vendors? And I guess, so what kind of made you ask the question in the first place?
So it's funny, I'm on both sides of these tables, at different events. When I owned my MSP, people were always trying to sell stuff to me out at the channel events. And as an MSP, I also participate in conferences and expos that are focused on the legal vertical. So ALA conferences and expos and ILTACon, a bunch of events that you guys may not be familiar with. So I was out with a friend up in Philly the other day, a guy who is pretty new to managing the relationships between the business partner sponsors of his Association of Legal Administrators chapter. And we're just talking, and he's talking about, well, what's the best way to get the people that are attending our conferences to talk to the vendors, because he wants to make sure that the business partners that are supporting his chapter, that they see the value in the relationship. So I think he was asking the right questions. And I always see myself as being in the middle of two worlds. I'm in the middle of the legal world and in the middle of the managed services world. So I know a lot of people that are really smart when it comes to this stuff. Yep. So that point of that LinkedIn post was to get some of these really smart people I know that are in the MSP channel to sort of post some ideas that my buddy over in the legal world, so that he could draw from those ideas, so he could take what all the great MSP channel partners have learned and apply it to that legal world, so that his partners are happy with what they get out of these shows.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of wanted to set the stage, but then kind of take a step back, because I want to give everybody a chance quickly to introduce themselves.
Sure.
Why don't we go Nelson, George, Troy, Jim, you already introduced yourself, and then Cynthia. So Nelson, why don't you kick things off real quick?
Sure. Hi, Nelson Gomes, Senior Vice President of Business Development at Medicus IT. We are a healthcare IT focused managed service provider in 6 different territories. And we support currently 5,000 plus providers across the country. So that's just a quick intro about me and Medicus.
Very cool. And George, I guess you can also tell people how we teamed up a little bit on this. I think it's streaming with your group.
It absolutely is. My people are live and in Technicolor on the other side. So my name is George Bardisi. I'm founder and CEO of BVoIP. BVoIP actually spun out of an MSP, and I've like many people on this stream and whoever's watching, right? I've been on both sides of the aisle, right? I've attended probably 100 conferences as an MSP, and then as BVoIP on the vendor side, right? I've been on the other, I'm a little bit echoing here, but I've been on both sides of the aisle, so I can actually talk to you from both what's looking behind the curtain and what's in front of the booth, I guess.
Absolutely. And we got Joel from Channel Pro saying hello to everybody as well. Hey, Joel. Cynthia, how about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, Cynthia Schreiner with LineGuard. Also used to work at an MSP. I kind of wore a lot of hats there, and now I run all of our community engagement through events and just basic brand awareness. And I always get to call myself the director of fun, because I used to do all the fun events. And so definitely having a good time with LineGuard for about 3 years now.
Very cool. I actually didn't know you came from an MSP. So see, we're learning new things every day.
Yep.
And then finally, Troy.
You bet. Troy Gelski, Director of Client Services, Biz Development, Sales, a lot of hats. Been with VAR staffing for a little bit over 4 years. I've probably done maybe 3 or 4 years of channel shows. And we, of course, you guys probably know, we do a lot of recruiting inside the channel. So.
Absolutely. Excellent. And so, I definitely want to keep the dialogue very open. By the way, if you're out there in LinkedIn or Facebook, we always kind of fun to know where you're listening in from. So tell us your city and state or country. And certainly if you have any questions that come up, please post them. But Jim, I think what got me going, you got a lot of responses, and actually literally the people who responded are the people I asked to come on this, because it's such a layered conversation. If you want in your own time, you can also go to the Facebook a feed that where George really dives in about kind of whether events are worth the ROI or not, whether you're getting good enough value from them. But I'd say the biggest focus for today is going to be how do you increase the ROI or the meaningful conversations, not just at the booth, but also, George, I know you're going to talk a little bit, I think, about some other activities that you all have done that you've seen some benefits from. But I guess, we'll kick things off, and then honestly, anybody can kind of chime in. But Cynthia, you chimed in on some tips, and so why don't we just start with you and talk about a little bit some of the strategies you all have had success with, and just as important, things that don't work.
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, like I said on the LinkedIn post, just don't be sitting at your seat, looking at your laptop, thinking that people are going to interrupt you and talk to you about your product. You need to be up on your feet. You need to bring that energy. You need to look like you actually want to be there. Nobody wants to talk to someone that's like in this wrinkled shirt and looks grumpy, like they don't want to be there. Like, bring some pizzazz. And if you yourself don't have the pizzazz, but you're there because you're the technical person and you can deep dive, have someone there at your booth that is knowledgeable, that can still bring that energy. I love swag. I'm always like, if you've been to a show with me, there's beach balls everywhere. Like, I'm always trying to bring the fun. But I mean, at the end of the day, does it really bring people by the booth? No, it's people. And it's making those meaningful conversations. Look at their badge. Where are they from? Maybe you know something about Toledo, or maybe you have a question about it. But just start to make those connections so they remember you.
Yep. Yeah. And one tip, and as a vendor, sometimes at the end of a show, you might have a flight to catch, so there might be reasons you have to leave. But try your best not to break down your booth before like the vendor time is over.
Before the show ends.
Yeah. They're also, well, one, it looks bad, but also two, I have signed people like right at the very end, because everybody, I'm kidding, there was 5 vendors that left. We were the only ones left, and we signed two MSPs. So George, I'm going to unlock you here.
Hold on. Now, George and I disagree sometimes.
Oh no,
I'm not sure George and Cynthia are ever on the same page. No, just kidding. So you have to know your math, right? I mean, the how I explain the booth is it's a call to action, right? It's the end of your call to action. You're driving people to that space as your end result. And like after the event, right? That's when you start to transact, right? You start to matriculate whatever happened during the event, right? So it's hard to determine your ROI unless you're selling something that's like an on-the-spot sign-up, right? And then you're walking away and you're like, hey, I signed 100 accounts. They put their credit card number in right on the page and I already transacted. That's awesome. I would argue that's not the norm, okay? But like, but before you determine the ROI of your booth or how to drive more interaction at the booth, you first need to figure out what you're doing before the event and during the event to get people to the booth. Because if your goal is just to put up a 10 by 10 with a table and 2 chairs and some pop-ups, you're going to be really unhappy, really, really unhappy. You're going to walk away saying, I should have just bought a car with cash rather than drop the tens of thousands of dollars for whatever event it is. So there's almost a caste system, and I hate to use that terminology, but like, if you're big enough and have the wheelbarrows of cash full enough and have a product that's really popping, and you put all of that together and you get that main presence and you can broadcast to a majority of whatever the event it is on stage, like without breakout rooms and all this other stuff, then that is your marketing strategy to drive to the call to action, to drive, come see me at the booth and I'll tell you more after you've delivered your message. But let's also be clear that there's a handful of people that exist in those blocks, right? There's only 1 or 2 platinum people. There's only so many people underneath of them, right? And then the rest of everybody else lives in 80% land, right? The people who don't get their message out in a large way and then have to work in a completely different blueprint, completely different game plan to get to the CTA, to get to the table, to get to the booth, right? But I'm going to Cynthia's point, right? Your presence there helps, and you don't want to look like you're disinterested. And we've all been at events where you walk down the aisle and you're like, my Lord, why did you even show up? It would have been better to have just the chair and the table with a black mask and go ahead and have a nice day. So there's different strategies depending on who you are, how much money you're spending, and what your strategy is. And it's going to be completely different based on those scenarios, I think.
Yep. Go ahead, Nelson. Nelson, I don't think we can hear you for some reason.
Yeah, I was muted.
There you go.
So what I was going to say, yeah, all good points, George, for sure. I think one of the things that as an MSP that has a focus in healthcare, we're looking at the trends as far as what some of our clients are doing. Do we, are they going out to the trade show, especially, during COVID? And, do we expect to get the amount of people that we would have in the past? So first and foremost, I think it's researching those shows that you're going to be at to make sure you get the most of it. And I think that Cynthia brought up, a good point about sitting behind the desk and waiting for somebody to come to you. And that's a no-no. Exactly. As an organization, I have a saying, if you don't have anybody in front of the booth, go fishing. So, which means, walk around and have that interaction with people that are there. You don't really have to talk business. It's more about, starting a conversation that ultimately will lead to possibly going and having a conversation. What we've done is strategically, since we're in healthcare, and Jim, I'm sure you can relate to this, is there's other vendors that, we have some synergies. So what we've done from a strategy standpoint is we're strategizing for all, not just one show, but for the remainder of the shows for the year to say, who do we want to surround ourselves that can help bring other opportunities in front of us, and we can bring opportunities for them. So that's one piece. The other piece is doing events, our own little events during these shows that don't interfere with it as well. So that's a big thing that we do, and we do that ahead of time, through our CRM tool, through marketing. We're going to drip campaign that ahead of time and have people register. And then we have, the giveaways to say, hey, are you coming to our event this evening? Like, oh, I didn't hear about it. Okay, here you go, sign up. The other piece of it that we've done that we've kind of helped create a buzz is, obviously at these events, there's going to be some alcohol, right? So what we do is register, come to our booth, get a bracelet so that you can go into the event. And now people have that bracelet going on in that event all day. Guess what's going to happen? What's that bracelet for? Where are you going? Oh, go to the Medicus IT booth. They're throwing an event. That then relates into opportunities for us to really have some good conversations. The next day, it's the talk of the town. Oh, were you at the Medicus IT? What a great party, right? That kind of thing. And then from there, we see a lot of different opportunities present themselves. So I think you got to be creative and think outside the box. If you're going to go to an event just to sit there and expect to get leads, that to me is not the way to go. We always see it even for our sales team. To be able to attend these events, they earn it. To me, it's a golden nugget. We know that it takes, in this day and age, and maybe you guys could tell me, but last time I checked, it takes 18 touches in order to get an appointment in front of somebody. Those trade shows, 22. Okay, so went up. So, those trade shows cut that, 22 touches quite significantly. So it's a matter of, you want the right people at the right show. And for me, the other piece of it, if you're going to go to the show, for me, it's important that there's a speaking opportunity. And as part of the strategy, we should be have an opportunity to speak. And for us, as we're trusted as strategic advisors for a lot of our clients in the healthcare space. So we want to be able to speak on number of topics that provide us with that level of expertise and exposure as part of what as being part of it. So for me, it's very strategic, and then tactics as far as during that show to say, even before the show, and we have a list prior to it. I tell my team, I want to come up with the top 10 people that you are going to connect with at this show. Who are those people? Why? What research do you need to do in order to get there? So for us, there's a lot of strategy before going into these events, and then executing during those events.
Nelson, are you reaching out to those 10 people prior to the event, or other leads or prospects trying to set up one-on-ones? You're making a big investment in travel and time. Yep. I feel it makes sense to try to set up other appointments in that city while you're there for that show.
Absolutely. So, and I'm glad you asked the question. So one of the things that we've done is we want our clients to be there, right? Because our clients are our champions. And to be quite honest, during these events, not only are they a champion, they're part of your sales team, especially those that you do a really good job with, right? So advocate for those clients to be there. We have our own CSM team that they're, specifically dedicated to our client base. And we want them to have that conversation with our clients to say, hey, we're going to be at the event. You should really attend.
Yeah.
Because we want them there as champions and as advocates of ours in that process. For those that we're going after, I will tell you that we do somewhat of a drip campaign, reaching out to them beforehand, depending on the conversation. It's going to be tricky. I think I would rather have the opportunity to do that face-to-face while we're there. So then do it and make that phone call, because 9 out of 10 times you're not going to get in front of them anyway. Mm-hmm. So finding a way, most likely in these more intimate events, if a client of yours is going, there's a good chance they know each other. And if they know each other, that's a soft intro. Hey, this person is going. Do you know them? How can you connect them with it? Can you bring them to the party? And that's where we've seen some great success. What I based on that, I also set, as a team, when we go to these events, as a team, we set, out of this event, we're going to set net new X amount of appointments.
Yep.
That has to be part of that focus.
So back to kind of, all right, there's a science, right? I think, Nelson, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, because quite frankly, we have a similar strategy. I like the tactical versus the strategic, right? 100%. There's something to be said for, if you don't know anyone who's going to be at the event, maybe you're going for the very first time, some of this stuff doesn't apply, right? Because you're going into a new, group or a new vertical that you may have not played in, and you're kind of going in with nothing and you're trying to figure out who's who, right? So there's some homework you can do ahead of time, but at first it's, who do we know that's going to this? It could be nobody, right? But going back from the, how do we determine ROI? Well, first you need to understand what your medium deal size is, right? And you need to understand how you make money off of whatever that size opportunity is. And then from there, you can work backwards and say, all right, well, the event, by the time we do the sponsorship, the travel, the party, the giveaway, the whatever the totality of the expense is, how many deals do need to matriculate in order to make our money back, right? Break even or above. And then from there, it's, all right, well, I need to set this many appointments to get this many deals. I need this many people in the pipeline to set this many appointments to set this many deals. It really is scientific to a degree, right?
Agreed, yep.
So like if you go to an event, let's say the scenario is you've never been to this association, you've never been to this chamber of commerce, you've never been to this legal group, whatever. It could be a vendor going to a DataCon for the first time. It's the same scenario, right? You're walking in the door. You have no strategic value yet because you haven't had anyone to target, right? This is new for you. Then the question is, how do you get enough names on the list to actually make the rest of your math work? Because if you know you need 100 people to get to your goal and you had 15 show up at your booth, then you're already past the point of return, right?
Yep.
Right.
I would say,
I was just going to say, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nelson.
No, go ahead, Cynthia. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, booth time doesn't end at the booth, right? We've closed deals in hot tubs. We've closed deals at the bar. We've closed deals with random conversations in the lobby while we were checking out and got those FTAs. Like, it doesn't, just because you're not at your booth doesn't mean that you aren't on. So also prepare yourself. You're going to be on a lot, and build a little bit of structure into your day to take care of yourself so that you can continue to be on, but you're going to be on the whole time you're there.
Yeah, it's to me, you bring up a great point, Cynthia, is, you have to make the most of your time while you're there. Mm-hmm. So it's not, it starts at 7:30 and it ends at 5. No, it ends when everybody's in bed in their rooms. That's when it ends. You're going to get a lot of great conversations as part of it. And it doesn't have to be anything that's really related to what you sell. But if you can, sprinkle a little bit of expertise in some of the things that you do based on what you offer, I think that adds a lot of value. The other thing I would tell you is, for us, we measure everything. So if you don't have a tool to measure that success, again, you're not going to measure it after the event. Give it 90 days to say, we invested this much, we got this amount of leads from now until then, and do we get any deals out of it? And it might not be 90 days. It might be 120 days. But you have to have some kind of measuring capability to understand, what the success looked like. Because then you're going to have to say, okay, next year, am I going to invest in this event? or am I going to double down on this event and make sure I get more people? So without that kind of data analytics, you're not going to be able to really understand what value do you really get at attending these shows.
Yeah, and there's lots of topics I want to hit, but Troy, I want to bring you into the conversation
Sure.
as well.
You
I see
bet.
VAR staffing's at a ton of events. Maybe just kind of some of your high level thoughts or anything that you want to chime in on that's been talked about.
Bet. And George and Nelson, you bring up a lot of good points. Cynthia as well, and Jim, you kind of know us. You've seen us at the show. You've also played some of our games. We want to have kind of a catch as well. It's a very competitive environment, so everybody's going in there, with their chests out, trying to sell their product or their service, right? One of the things that you have is if you put a widget or a fidget spinner or a pen on your table, they can just grab it and go, right? Or, hey, drop your business card in here and we might, draw a raffle. You want to have something that's a big catch. You want to have a time involvement. We at VAR Staffing every couple months will come up with, what are we going to do differently at the show? We've done blackjack tournaments. We've done Guess This. The people at Marketopia, we think we stole their idea one time, and we did the big box of cash, right? Guess the cash. So you have this investment of time, people coming by your booth, involved in some sort of competition, because let's be honest, everybody likes to compete, right? We had a race car way back when, so we had a huge line. So we're able to walk down these lines, have meaningful conversations, not only grab a business card, but hey, have you heard about us? Do you know what we do? We are XYZ. And then to kind of George's point as well, and Nelson, you bring a great point up, the after parties, the conglomerations of having like ourselves at VAR Staffing partner with George and a whole bunch of other vendors to host an event, right? So not only do maybe I don't know some people, let's say it's my first event, but riding some coattails with George and making some introductions or vice versa at night, at dinner, whatever it might be, you need to have those kind of toe in the door conversations to be able to close some deals, wake up early, grab breakfast, be available. You don't need to be loud and boisterous and obnoxious about it, but you need to be able to bring something around. Well, we
you should be loud and boisterous and obnoxious.
I have to say, I might be where George and I agree. I think we're both pretty loud. No, we definitely don't have to be. It can help sometimes.
So, but having that game plan ahead of time really helps, because we every quarter, Matt, we budget and say we've been invited to 30 shows. Which ones do we want to spend our money on? Where's our bread and butter? Where do we have the most partners? Because I think everybody's been knowing, if I have a Jim Turner that's kind of walking down the halls with me, he might introduce us to 5 or 6 people, just shaking hands. Hey, this is Troy at VAR. You guys need to talk. You told me you had a problem with XYZ. So we want to have those relationships because we've spent so many years developing them, and we want them to be our cheerleaders sometimes. So using that word of mouth is great.
There's a lot of truth to what you said, right? Especially when you're in the MSP seat, right? And you're targeting a group that you've never kind of introduced yourself to before, right? Lawyers or, municipalities or accountants or whatever, right? Sometimes it takes successive years to really get a presence, right? I mean, sometimes the first one's not going to go well, but the longevity absolutely counts.
Yeah, I agree. And Jim, I'm not sure if you do this, but we certainly do, since we're kind of focused in the healthcare spaces. Be part of that organization that's throwing that are having those events, so that you have a say. And at the same time, for me, I'm on 2. I chair one, and I'm on the board of another state association, where for me is I'm an advocate for all those that are exhibiting, right? And for me, my purpose is how much more time and can I get in front of those that are attending. That's kind of my job, to ensure that we have that alignment. And then in turn, those organizing the board knows, hey, this is important for the vendors, because technically they're paying for this event to happen. So having that alignment, I think, is very helpful, and it's strategic too.
In a lot of these cases, it's not just the event that you're paying for. When you're a business partner with the ALA, you're funding that organization for all of their meetings, whether or not you have an opportunity to present. So I agree that you have to show up for the events, that you have to show up for all their meetings. When they have opportunities to provide educational content, you need to be there. It's much bigger than just showing up for the expo that they may do just once a year. So you're selling to this group all year round. So I agree with you on that, Nelson.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've done to help, right, that leads into that is build content for those organizations, because there's a lack of it, right? Yeah. That's what helps them. They need to get credits for certain things, those attendees, for example, in healthcare at CEU credits. So sometimes they want to do webinars. So I actually have a town hall that I do every quarter for 12 MGMA states, associations, right? And it's a town hall meeting. You don't have to really prep as far as putting slides together. We send out an invite, and it's a whole bunch of different questions that we ask, right? And then as a panel, we talk about those different questions. So different people may have different perspectives. That then leads into being kind of an expert in that field. So when you're speaking at that event, now you have that other FaceTime. So I think it's a combination of things that you need to do in order to be successful when you have those events.
I mean, 100% agree. Sorry, Cynthia, I'll give you a second. But
okay.
It is a year plan, right? If you are targeting a community, I agree with you 1,000%. Like, just showing up at the annual events, probably not enough unless you're planning to draw it out several years to get that successive touch, right? But at the end of the day, I think the echoing that's come out of this entire group kind of ties into what I've been saying in the Facebook feed coming into this, if you were on that side. It's everything before, after, at night, social, tactical, the plan. Like, the booth is like the very last thing on the list, right? The ROI from that is only captured if you did the tactical and strategic ahead of time. Right. Otherwise, you're going to be very unhappy with your investment. It's not going to come back to you. And sometimes you're okay with that because you can burn the money. A lot of times you're going to have, if you're the person swiping, it's your credit card, you're going to be very, very unhappy with that.
Yeah, Cynthia, you wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, that was just going to add. I mean, and the reason why I know a lot of these faces is because it's also make sure that you're taking some time with the other vendors. Know what they do. Make sure that they understand what you do. If someone comes to me and they're unhappy with their voice over IP, I'm going to let them know that, hey, we've worked with George Bordisi before. He's got a great crew. Go check them out. Other vendors are going to help you out too and bring people your way when they hear of problems at other MSPs or whoever your clients you're talking to, when they've got a problem and they know you can solve it and they know that you and your team are nice and easy to work with and always, available to help, they're going to be more likely to send it to you than to maybe one of your competitors. So make sure that you're making those relationships too. Because it's very, very important.
Yeah, no, that was actually where I was going to chime in, because I know Troy kind of alluded to that. Is you can't underestimate the relationships with the other vendors. And yeah, it might be because of the product.
And be open to share some of your statistics with them. We just had a vendor reach out to us and said, we're working on a project. We have a very unique situation, but can you provide us, in our channel, what we focus on? We have those statistics. Can you give us some money, some numbers, and crunch some figures together in a few geographic locations? We're happy to do that because, again, we scratch each other's backs.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I would also say, for the MSP folks, leverage your vendors. There's some MDF money that they have, right? I'm sure, George, if you're a big client of George's, then you want to do events and you need a little bit of help, lean on those vendors. There's some vendors that have MDF funds available to you. That's a big part of what we do. It's a relationship, not just with those attending, but with the vendors and especially your vendor partners, and make sure that you are a good partner. Right?
That's a two-way street, right?
Absolutely, George.
If you show up and ask for that MDF and you hadn't talked to whoever your contact was for a really long time, you might not get it. But if there's a conversation, if there's a strategic value for both sides, a win-win, you're going to get that money almost every time.
No, I agree. And one of the things that we do with our value partners, and it's kind of a cadence that we have with them on a monthly basis, is okay. Here's out of the show. Here's some of the opportunities that came out of this show that are specific to what you're offering. So now they can see the return that we've done based on the show that we attended. Why? Because next year I might need more. So I want to make sure that I have, I have that strategy built in order to do it.
Yeah, and you can put together. I think some MSPs might not really understand this or know about it. I guess is that a lot of vendors can work together in a specific event. So, and even if they're,
100%.
you know, maybe don't play nice at certain places, that doesn't mean they won't play nice with you. I mean, you know, I mean, we weren't competitive at the time because we weren't at Kaseya at the time. But like ID Agent, I know, you know, I did an event with Eric Torres from Datto where we both spoke, and it made for like a really interesting security conversation between backup and dark web and all that stuff. So yeah, I don't think everybody realizes that. One of the things I wanted to kind of bring back around is, and Nelson, you mentioned it, and George, I think this kind of gets into some of that conversation about ROI, I guess, potentially, because we've really been focusing on the booth part, but there's the speaking part, and not, to your point, not everybody can afford to speak at events, and I guess that's kind of why I asked this question, because I felt this way, and ID Agent was kind of different breed because we could sell so easily at events. But I almost felt, and I'd love to get other people's opinions, for a long time that if we weren't speaking, we weren't going to be at the event. Like we weren't going to get enough value just from kind of the booth experience, which I know is kind of what you were talking about there, George. But it was the speaking. I can tell you, we were at Robin Robbins events, like her road shows, and we were still pretty well known at this time. But even us, like at the booth for day one, it was no traffic, like just very little traffic. And then we kept having to remind ourselves, we're like, but we're speaking day two, just remind ourselves. And then we spoke on day two, and then boom, it was like a completely different event essentially for us. And so I just kind of like to hear other people's experiences speaking versus not. George,
well, let me just set the stage. Let me set the stage.
George.
There is a difference between main stage speaking and breakout room. They're not the same.
Yes.
Be very careful about that. And then there's also this little kind of like, oh, we have this little kind of theater area off to the side. No, that's not the same either, right? So like we need to be very specific about this so that we're not getting lost in the sauce and people don't spend money, you know, and get unhappy. But you know, like when again, not trying to go back and reinvent the wheel, but like if your strategy is I am big enough, I have the funds to be one of the top 2, 3, 4, 5 guys that can have those spots. Your strategic value, to Nelson's point, strategic versus tactical, is completely different on how you're going to, you know, kind of go to this event and plan it, right? So to your point, Matt, I'm sure everybody else will say the same thing. That is probably worth the extra spend if you can afford it, right?
To be on the main stage and have a large presentation or panel. Yeah.
Right. And so that kind of, and Cindy, I'll let you chime in, right?
Yeah.
It also begs that question. Is it worth doing 3 events as just a booth or one big main stage event? You know what I mean?
I think
here's what I'll tell you. I will never pay for a main event. Never. Okay. Because I think that the value of who you are and what you're giving, for me, ethically, it doesn't make sense. So I could have a main stage as long as I pay for it. I'm not going to do it. I could tell you that the organizations I belong to, and I think Jim kind of probably falls in this category, you don't pay for it, you earn it, right? And I think, you know, as long as you can be a subject matter expert, which, you know, for us, it's big to be able to kind of have that conversation and be part of that, is where the value is we're being asked to speak because of, you know, our knowledge of the subject matter. I'll be honest, we've gotten paid to speak at certain events.
Got it. But yeah, I mean, but in the context of the channel, it's a pay for play situation. I mean, so Cynthia, I'll let you kind of chime in on that part as well.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, we've had a lot of success too, just with those like 2-minute, 1-minute quick pitches where it's like after they heard our pitch and they were like, oh, hold on, you do something different than I thought, or I didn't realize that maybe you could solve that problem. So, you know, when we say main stage, it doesn't have to be the big keynote speaking. It doesn't have to be the day one, you know, after the welcome. It can be something small that maybe just costs you a few extra $1,000. We've found that those have given us a lot of really good just return to people coming to the booth and talking to us and you know, brand awareness. The other thing too with the breakout is sometimes I try to give them one thing at the breakout, and to get the other part of it, they have to come to the booth. And so now they didn't just come to the breakout. They came to the breakout and now they want, you know, I gave them a left sock. Now they want their right sock. They got to come to the booth to get it. So just
again, the call to action, right? The booth is the end of that part, right?
Exactly. But yeah, you got a room of 100 people that maybe wouldn't come stop by the booth, but now they want their socks. So they will. And then you can have that conversation and give them the demo. So just try to like think outside the box.
Yep.
Nelson, I think it's a little different for you and I because we're the MSPs in that we're subject matter experts. In my case, Frontline is focused on legal. In your case, focused on medical. We're going to have different speaking opportunities. Whereas at these channel events where you're basically selling to all the different MSPs and you may be one of a couple different VoIP providers or RMM providers, maybe there's another staffing company, I'm not even sure. But when you have that, it's a little bit different, that competition, and that's why the conference organizers know that they can charge for it. So it's a different world. I get that. There, Matt, I know you had some questions that you wanted to cover, but there was something that I wanted to find out.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for years that I've been going to conferences and also that I've been sitting behind the booth, you'll occasionally hear somebody at the booth with some type of complaint, whether it's the placement of their table, they're nowhere near the liquor, man, the hours of availability at this conference are no good. I feel that there's always complaints from someone at one of these conferences. On the LinkedIn conversation that I started, I guess that was yesterday, I had invited several conference organizers who started chiming in, and I thought that was really helpful as well. All of you seem to be very much talking about the accountability of the people, of your research, of your people working the booths. But if there was anything that conference organizers need to know that they should hear from their partner, from their vendors, and not in a situation where you're complaining because you already spent the money, maybe in preparation for the next event, what do you think the conference organizers should know? Are any of these complaints valid, or is it just sour grapes because they weren't? They didn't.
Okay, George wants to take this one.
I should write a master's novel on this. Here's the reality, right? A lot of the items that you're talking about are pay for play, to Matt's point, right? Hey, your size depends on your placement. When you signed up depends on what's available. And then, like, in my opinion, big picture, to answer your question, it would behoove the conference organizer exponentially if the person communicating with the vendors are not just order takers, they're actually planning the event with them. What is your plan? What are you going to do to make this successful? What do we need to do with you to make sure you're walking out of here with something to show for it? These questions are never asked. They're talked about afterwards when somebody is in talk mode and they're like, man, this was horrible. Why would I ever come back to this? And they're like, well, did you do this? Did you do this? Nobody wants, that's the wrong time to have those questions answered. But they never prompt them ahead of time. And if they did, they would be way, way more successful. Because then they start talking about what you and Nelson have been talking about, the tactical value. Who are you sending? What's your nighttime strategy? Or, it's not just about the giveaway, the pens, the whatever, right? It's about how are you going to tackle this event so that you actually have generated conversations worthy of another step. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you go back and ask those same conference organizers that started that LinkedIn thread, I'm going to tell you almost none of them have those conversations. They're like, hey, Visa, MasterCard, or American Express, please. Like, that's horrible, really. I understand why. They have sales goals too. But remember, we're all in businesses where it's a lot easier to repeat with somebody who's already done something good with me than having to go out there and find new people year over year over year. And I think they're doing themselves an injustice by not having that conversation up front.
Yeah, and Troy, any thoughts on what George just said, or Jim's first
True.
question?
And to Jim's point as well, there's definitely bad placement. We've been to many shows where we were, like Patrick Swayze going to grab baby in the corner, and it's hard. And George had a booth near it one time, and we were both looking at each other going, we're out here in right field and nobody's hit a ball even to left or center. So what are we doing? So it was an effective spend. So if we had a cool little, jingle back there or something fancy, if you don't have that, you're never having that magnetism to your booth. So in retrospect, would I go back to that specific show and that organization or that model and not pick a different location or try to be prime? Great, but I don't want to spend $75,000 to be on the front row right by the door. I'd rather spend $5,000 to be just like everybody else or whatever it is, just monetary numbers.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and I do, I would agree with what George said in the sense of like, what works. I think of like a channel program. What works best for me is to tell my MSP partners how other MSPs have made money off the product. Because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And that's probably definitely something that's lost. I mean, some do it, a lot don't, which is, yeah, before the show, what has worked? Give us the top 10 things that you've seen from vendors that has worked for engagement, or, and, not everything's created equal, obviously. But there's a lot of different tactics, and especially if it's a new vendor that's, new to events, that's going to be so critical for them to understand. Because again, maybe they don't even understand that you have to be at the bar you don't have to drink, but you probably do need to be at the bar, because there's a lot of people talking and having conversations. Cynthia, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I think the other thing, it's going to sound so silly, but there's some event organizers that it's just the little things where they're to, set the booth up. They have like some chips and water out for us, like I had one where the last day, like they had a vendor lounge and they had Bloody Marys for all the vendors. It's silly, but then you go to the next show and there's not a bottle of water while you're setting up. There's not anything. No one cares. Yeah. And you've spent tens of dollars and you can't just like have a water station for me. Like, it blows my mind.
Yeah, that's why I get involved in me or my team get involved in as many of those organizations as I can, so that vendors like us, or MSPs or whatever the case may be, have a voice to say, guys, this is what you need to do in order to get the people that you want to exhibit, because you might get them this year.
Be happy that you're in that mix, because Nelson, on the other side of the aisle, and I've done the MSP events and I've done the vendor events. On the vendor events, there's no say. Don't even bother. To get into the room to even have that conversation, you're going to put a lot of energy out. It's unfortunate. I'm happy that on your level, you actually have the door to walk in and say, hey, let me help you. You need help? I can give you help. Here's what I can do. Here's how we can help each other.
Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely a different challenge. I think that, for MSPs, and Jim, I'm not sure if you do this. I keep going back to Jim because obviously we're, vertical focused is, we know that those state organizations want more members, and a lot of those non-members are probably our clients, and they see that value that we can help bring people. So we help them see the big picture on why we're so important. In instances like you, George, I'm sure it's tough because it's, hey, take it or leave it. You don't want it. There's another guy that's going to take your spot.
Well, you're absolutely right. To be honest, and I'm sure you see them at the MSP, kind of events that you would sponsor at your level. There's people that actually work the event. I mean, this is probably frowned upon in a lot of circles, but there's people that work the event. They're not formally sponsoring at all, right?
Right.
They're doing all the tactical things without ever dropping a penny, other than showing up and maybe a bar tab, right? And to that point, you need to look at you and you need to look at your team. If you're not that guy or that girl that can do the late night stuff, bring somebody with you, because the value there is so high. If you miss that part, if booth time closes and you're out doing something else, you're missing it. And frankly, you need to strategize about that before you even walk in the door. And the other thing that's worth mentioning is about half of the conference doesn't end up showing up in front of you, right? In your vendor area, right? I mean, that's just usually how it goes. If 2,000 people go to the event, how are you going to capture the other half? This is the question, right? And so a lot of people don't have a good answer to it, other than what Troy and what Nelson and what we've been talking about. There's got to be a collaborative event to get there. Otherwise, all right, let's say you had a great event, 2,000 people, and you had 400 at your booth. Well, there's a lot of other people that you missed. It's just that straightforward. So
yeah, and I want to add one thing to Cynthia's list of maybe less important, but shipping tape. Have extra shipping tape for your vendors when they run out of it, please.
Yes.
So we're not panicking at the last second. But I also kind of wanted to put a little stamp on this.
And a box opener.
Yeah.
There, so you can open the boxes that you ship to yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. But because we've been talking about like the bar quite a bit, and I don't want to get lost on people that we're really talking about networking. We're not necessarily talking about drinking. You can drink, you can do whatever you want, but and this is where it goes back to having vendors you're friends with that because when I know that when I go to the bar and Cynthia's talking to 4 MSPs and I come over, she's going to introduce me because she likes me, she knows who I am, and boom, I've just been introduced to 4 people, and then they start to get to know you, and that's where you start getting again more ROI, meaningful conversations, because it might not start off as a business conversation, but maybe the next day, now you're friendly.
Well, right. Because then they're going to come by and be like, oh, hey, thanks again for this last night. It was good to meet you. And now, guess what? They're at your booth.
Yeah,
and they're demo, and you can hand them the material, and you can talk to them, have the business conversation, because you just made a personal connection.
So just extrapolating on that, would it be
they'll
helpful?
take your call.
Go ahead, Jim.
Would it be helpful if the event organizers had somebody who was involved in the event, the organization that was holding the event, if they made a point of having some of their people at the bar afterwards or at the dinner or wherever, if they made a point to make introductions of the sponsors, the vendors, to some of the members that are in attendance? Because that seems to me they're going to have.
I've been to shows that do that.
What's that?
And I've been to, I can think of like 2 vendors for sure 2 conference organizers that do that. And again, it's just another step of showing that they actually care about their vendors. It's not just like, to George's point, is it going to be MasterCard, American Express, or Visa? They actually care. They're like, hey, this is someone I want you to meet. I think they would really like you. Like, this is a big one. Like, yeah, when conference organizers do that, I'm going to spend more money with them. I'm going to spend more money consistently with them, because I know that they're taking care of me at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I know it's
one good point, guys. I want to bring up real quick, and Jim, you kind of mentioned this of kind of having maybe a hand-holding relationship or an icebreaker of introductions. We do a lot of lunch and learns, and James and I, we go around the circuit, and there's a little buzz. So sometimes we'll have some of these organizers come up to us and say, hey, somebody in group 1, 2, 3 has a staffing issue. You need to get in touch with them. Or it'd be helpful if they had, a little bit maybe of insight of maybe sitting in some of these breakout sessions or these lunch and learns, of being able to be and have more organic conversations, not necessarily cherry picking an idea and saying you need to go talk to Jim over here or Nelson over there. But you know what? I keep on hearing, VoIP, you guys need to talk to George, or George, here's 5 people that I talked to or heard today physically that need some assistance. Maybe you should go ahead and try to get in front of them. So maybe rather than trying to sell you a $5,000, dinner with the group, you could have some sort of other parameter of an introduction of not you having to do the work and spend the money, but maybe somebody else saying, we appreciate your business. You come here 5 years in a row. We want to do something else for you and try to help you.
To your point, Jim, right? Like, at some point, somebody in that organization needs to put the money talk aside and say, I need to understand you better so I can figure out who to connect you with, right? Like, if the person has no idea what your value is, how can they even do the intro? They're just not interested to even do it in many cases, right? So like, that comes back to the point I made earlier, which is, how can I make sure this event is successful for you? How can I make sure this conference is successful for you? If that conversation is not happening ahead of time, you're on your own. And now you have to get a little bit guerrilla to figure it out rather than getting help up front to make it work. And I think that's very important from an organizer standpoint.
Yeah. So I kind of want to shift a little bit to gimmicks, and this still plays into what you were talking about, Jim, which is the organizer trying to find ways to increase engagement for vendors at events and things like that. And so one of the most popular ones is the old treasure hunt. And so for those listening who don't know what that means, it's essentially, if there's 20 vendors and they reward the attendees for going to the booths. Now it's kind of a catch-22. On one side of it means somebody's swinging by your booth for a stamp. And they might not want to have any type of conversation. Now, on the flip side, it does give you a chance to have some interaction. Now, you might strike out on a bunch of them. You're giving me the quotes there, George. But I have had experience turning those into real opportunities. So I can already tell where George is going with this in terms of his opinion on the treasure hunt. But I don't know if any of you all have experienced treasure hunt, just kind of general feeling about it.
Mixed.
Go ahead, Susie. Yeah.
To your point, like sometimes it's good, sometimes it's it's like people's spouses that don't have anything else to do, so like they're running around and doing it, which is great. Like, I think it's awesome that people bring their families. Like, you're in these great locations, these beautiful hotels, like bring your families, it's great. But like, that doesn't help me get return on my investment. But then sometimes, but listen, if I do 100 stamps and I have 5 decent conversations that lead to appointments, fine, I'll stamp wives things all day if I get those 5 conversations.
Yeah, but how about, sorry, Cynthia, how about if it was Jim Turner is in a treasure hunt and he has to bring a referral over to your booth to check it off, right? That'd be something interesting where you're saying, I want to piggyback on this and I don't want to just go there and get the stamp and just say, here's my business card, let me take yours and see, I want to win the drone. It's, let me give you somebody that may have a need, and there's more of just kind of this organic growth that's happening from that. And maybe Jim introduces Nelson and he says, oh yeah, we used you guys in the past. You will think about in the future. That's all you really need, right? Is just meeting somebody else, something new.
I wish it was that simple, Troy, but the reality is that the Jims and the Nelsons, they're at a caliber where they're not walking to play into the door to play that game. I mean, you're just not going to do it. I feel like the smaller guys who are less focused, they're like, oh yeah, I'll throw my name in. What I have no chance to lose. If I don't play, I can't win, kind of thing. But like, Jim's probably in the strategic conversation. Nelson's probably in the strategic conversation. They don't have time to play the pin the tail on the donkey, go around the room game. To be honest with you.
But that goes back to who you're targeting. Because I can tell you one of the most successful things we ever did at a show with ID Agent. We kind of created our own. It wasn't a treasure hunt. I guess it kind of was a version of it, but it was our own thing. It had nothing to do with going to anybody else's booth. And it depends on your offering. For us, we were able to offer more domains. That was our catch, for your licensing, adding domains. And so we had 5 ways you could add domains at the event. And it was a lot of social selling. So it was like, one, wear the ID Agent shirt that we're giving away, and you'll get an extra domain. To your point, Troy, bring somebody like Jim, bring another MSP who's not a partner to our speaking slot or our booth, and you get another thing. And it built on each other, and we had tremendous success with it. I know it's not always going to work.
Worth, right? $4,500 vacation, a Tesla, charger, right? Like some people have given away some crazy things on even on the smaller vendor cards, right? Like 4 vendors, 1 vendor, 2 vendors.
I have a couple of things that I can share. So one of the things that I did is I bought this little robot that I can control and basically have him go around the whole exhibit hall, right? Even snoop on my competitors, which was awesome. But what I did with him is I put a shirt on him and followed me to the Medicus. At the time, it wasn't Medicus, but the Medicus IT booth and get a free a dark web scan. Mm-hmm. So I leverage my vendors to say, hey, I'm going to do this. Can we get can you add a couple more scans? And once it started, it was like wildfire. So leverage some of these things that you can do that are going to differentiate you. Like nobody had a robot there. I even I had the organizers give them a tag, right? And it was fun. Everybody wanted to take a picture with the robot. Okay, cool. Yeah. The other thing that we've done, and we're going to, something that we're looking to do is even if you partner with other vendors, right? But do a charity event before the show starts, right? And what better way to do charity is gamble. Have a night, a casino night the night before, and you'll be surprised on how many people you're going to attract because it's all this, betting and having fun and doing all this other stuff. So that's one way. And the other thing that we've done, I created this thing called at the time was the Medicus IT Olympics, right? And it was during the Olympics, and instead of doing all these athletic things, it was the minute to win it games. And I had 6 stations set up where you had to compete against somebody. And one of the games was, you had all these different colors of Skittles and you go up against somebody else and trying to do it against them. Whoever won, you get tickets. They put the tickets in all these different grab bag type of things that they can get. It just was a very fun atmosphere. And then you put your clients as part of that in these types of event, and it really creates a buzz. And the next day, that party is the talk of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of funny comment. Jim said Jim doesn't want the drone, and for those who don't know, Jim's out of Washington D.C. I am as well, and Jim, I guess you can't do drones in D.C., correct?
No. I guess the FAA, the FBI, I think they all frown upon that. You got to get pretty far outside of the Beltway before you're allowed to fly the drone.
So Matt, I actually had a couple of people on my end put some comments, questions in. I don't know if I can rapid fire them.
Yeah, please. That'd be great.
So Brent comes in and says, as a visitor, where the vendor's booth is has nothing, in bold, to do with how engaged I am. It's the knowledge and engagement of the person actually in the booth. A majority are just crap. So to make the point of letting me know, like, be careful about who you're sending, and to Cynthia's point, who's sitting behind the booth, right? I mean, if you have somebody that's super unengaged, it looks like they're going to be very unengaged. A couple of other things that are
George, was that Brett Fairbanks?
Yeah,
I swear to God, just from the tone of the way you were reading it, I knew who you were talking.
Yeah. So Keith Nelson has also been, kind of pumping in as well. Other than making fun of me because he's a Dallas fan and I'm an Eagles fan. Put that aside. He says, as a customer, I'm always looking for conversations about how you can improve my service delivery, how you can support my customers alongside with me. Frankly, and not to sound too arrogant, but we as an MSP are so profitable, we don't really care about the prizes. We need to figure out how to add legitimate value, business value. That was his opinion. He comes back and says, have someone speak from your customer group about something compelling, not how great my company is, and speak on like community or something that's helpful, not necessarily the sales pitch. I think that's kind of education-based selling or community-based selling. And then lastly, he says, every event I've attended from the sidelines, the successful business people are engaging in meaningful conversations rather than scavenging for the guy looking for something for free. The methodology invests the blue light mentality. I'm impressed when providers contact me prior to the event that know about my business and want to talk about something better, right? I can go to a casino night and gamble and hope to win a big prize, or I can go to an event and build my business. You guys can multitask better, clearly. You want to play and socialize. That's a little bit different than doing business. Of course, there's a median to all things there. So those were the comments that popped to the top.
Got it. No, that's kind of a great way to sort of, because I mean, we're up on the hour and I want to be mindful of everybody's time. Maybe I'll kind of give everybody a chance to do a little bit of closing statements, but I think, I mean, George, you obviously talked about a lot about the math, and one of the things I would say is also, make sure you're reading exactly like what you're getting out of an event. One very important thing I had written down, we didn't really talk about, was whether you're getting the list or you're not getting the list, right? That's a big component.
Yes.
So make sure you're aware of it, because you're going to be very disappointed when you invested a lot of money and realize this event doesn't give you the list. And you may have to change your strategy around whether you're getting the list or not. You might have to be a little bit more aggressive in trying to get contact information, business cards, things like that. So I'll just kind of do a little, I don't know if anybody has either a last second kind of tip or whatnot. Maybe we'll just do a kind of final around the room. Troy, we'll start with you.
Well, I mean, I think it's very important. Like I said, you have to have a competitive message. You can't just sit back and expect people to come to your booth. So have something engaging, already have a couple conversations lined up. Tell your network who that may be. If it's other vendors, other partners, please come see me. It's important, whatever it may be. Let's catch up and, try to get to those dinners as well. Do something fun. But really, like you had said, George, you had mentioned, if you have garbage behind the booth, you're never really going to go anywhere. You have to have people that can go out there and preach, because ultimately it's a sales world. You have to sell your product or service. So you have to have those number one glass chewing people out there that are willing to be up at 7 a.m. and stay out till 2 a.m. sometimes to get the deal done.
Yep. Jim?
Send your smartest people, not your prettiest people.
Absolutely. Cynthia?
Yeah. Yep. I was gonna piggyback on that. You want, friendly, engaging people. It's all about connections at the end of the day. They may not buy my product, but they know who we are. They know what we do. And when they're ready for us, they know I'm going to be there. And I'm going to be happy to have that conversation, whether it's 4 days, 4 months, or 4 years down the road. But don't just send someone because you think they can stay up all night or what. Make sure that they actually know your product and they're smart, because especially in the channel, they'll see through it very quickly.
Yep. George?
I'm going to repeat, Nelson's comment, right? Strategy versus tacticality, right? I've always come up on the tactical side. I didn't walk in the front door with the wheelbarrow big enough to do the $120,000 diamond spot, right? And have that full stage speaking situation. So like to Nelson, like me and Nelson are very similar in that way, right? I'm going to hack and grind and I'm
Hustle.
going to go guerrilla, right? And hustle's probably a great word too, right?
Gotta
I'm
hustle.
gonna, but it takes a lot of effort, and especially for newer people going to, or maybe you're an established person going to a new event, plan, right? But don't get discouraged if the first one didn't work. It can work, but sometimes it's better off for you to scope things out ahead of time before you really make that big investment, so that you know what you're dealing with. So
Yeah.
Yep. Nelson.
I think George took my thunder, but for me, but it's the same message. For me, it's all about strategy and tactical execution through all the entire process. We actually have project plans for each and every show, so that we are very specific and very strategic on every single one that we do. And again, I think you brought something up great, George, when you talked about, hey, if there's a show that you want to attend, maybe you're not sure about, just attend it as an attendee. Get a feel for it first, and then that'll give you an okay. Maybe there's I'll attend the fall, or I'll exhibit in the fall conference. So a lot of these organizations will give you a free pass just as an attendee if you're thinking about it for the following year. So be smart about it, and for me, it's making the most out of the time that you were there and that your team is there. So and that's where the tactical and the planning goes into play. Don't go there in hopes of having setting meetings, which should be, but you should have scheduled meetings and appointments, even with clients that are going to be there anyway, because they can be a referral source for you.
Yep. And I'll leave things going back to the people. Especially if you're a business owner and you're sending somebody to represent your company, you have to trust them. They definitely need to have energy, because it is a lot of hustle. It's a lot of hard work. Events are brutal. I mean, they can be 18-hour days, several days in a row. And everybody's equal at a booth. As far as like, one of the rules I had for my team is like, no one shows up late, especially for booth setup, because it sucks, but we all have to do it, and just be responsible, because if you're late and your booth is empty, it's everybody notices. So, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, and there's 1,000 other ways we could have gone with this conversation. We could probably talk about this I know we could talk about it for hours. So,
Yeah.
but we'll give everybody, we'll end it here, and just thank you to the panelists. And this was a great discussion. I think a lot of tips and things not to do as well. And so thank you to everybody on the panel and everybody listening today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.